brutal, blood-soaked, and downright ugly. Much like its immediate predecessor, 28 years later, The Bone Temple follows the uber dark and gritty tone established in the previous film right down to the T, despite it being helmed this time by a different director to its predecessor, that being Nia DaCosta. You can tell that this movie has a different director immediately by looking at the screen. Gone are the frenetic, choppy editing that was abundant throughout the previous film. Gone are the unusual, quirky camera angles. I said in my review of the previous film that the frenetic camera angles of the last movie made the movie a little hard to watch. There was no silence and no stillness in this movie's predecessor. Every camera shot, every edit was highly stylized, which looked creative and cool, though it didn't help the audience build a connection with the characters, and it created a continual reminder you were actually watching a movie rather than being immersed in the scene. I thought the sequel, The Bone Temple, would be better without that style. However, in hindsight, after watching The Bone Temple, which is directed in a more straightforward, traditional way, I realized that that highly stylized framing and frenetic editing from the previous film is ultimately what made the previous film unique and stand out from other zombie movies. Without that frenetic pace that is typical of Danny Boyle's work, the follow-up film, Bone Temple, just felt like it lost what made its predecessor feel unique, and as a result, the Bone Temple feels generic and just feels like a mediocre zombie movie that is probably not worth watching. However, about halfway through the Bone Temple, I began to see things differently. And the reason I saw things differently is because I was so impressed with Ralph Fiennes' incredible performance as Dr. Kelson. Fiennes, who is arguably the standout actor of the previous film, also returns as the uber ambiguous, eccentric, and super quirky witch doctor of sorts. However, unlike the previous film, where his role was ambiguous and his screen time was limited, Ralph Fiennes absolutely dominates the screen in this movie, and his role is less ambiguous. He is still super quirky, but he's also clearly working on the side of humanity. I think Fiennes has more screen time than any other character in this movie, and that's awesome, because Fiennes was awesome in his role here. Fiennes was so impressive that he could be nominated for an Oscar for his role here. But I guess movies like this don't get nominated for those kinds of awards. So it probably won't happen. Anyway, no kidding. Fiennes is super awesome in his role in Bone Temple. And he is the key reason why I would elevate this movie, The Bone Temple, to being overall an above mediocre movie rather than a generic zombie flick. I mean, if you're just a big fan of blood and gore and all that type of hack slash stuff from zombie movies, then you may well love 28 years later The Bone Temple. But for me, that stuff gets boring, especially since we've seen it just last year when 28 years later was released. I think Fiennes saved this movie. Not to say the script, direction, or the other actors in Bone Temple were bad. It's just that Fiennes was the excellent piece in an otherwise mediocre zombie movie. 28 years later, The Bone Temple, just like its predecessor, walked an extremely tight rope between making me want to walk away from this series altogether, somehow drawing me back in. And just like its predecessor from 2025, this movie has a major hook that completely draws you in to want to watch the Bone Temple sequel. And yeah, I would definitely be watching the sequel. I won't spoil what the hook is because I don't reveal spoilers in my reviews. But all I can say is it was a major hook. So major it'll probably hook just about any long-term fan of the 28 series in. There's also a pretty epic and amazing scene in the Bone Temple that is so damn cool to watch that it is seriously one of the most memorable scenes I have ever seen in any movie. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say it was Ralph Fiennes' character, the uber eccentric and downright weird Dr. Kelson, dancing in some sort of weird cult-like tribal ritual. Anyhow, this scene was bizarrely funny and brilliantly shot, and so was much of this movie in a satirically subtle way. Oh, and before I forget to mention, the young boy Spike, who played the son of Aaron Taylor Johnson's character from the previous movie, takes a complete backseat from being the main protagonist in the Bone Temple, and instead, the Bone Temple focuses on this group of Machiavellian misfits led by a deranged nutter, Sir Jimmy Crystal, played by Jack O'Connell. Eventually, after this cult group of bandits do some very nasty stuff, these misfits come head to head against Ralph Fiennes' character, Dr. Kelson. And that pretty much becomes the core story of the plot of this movie. The Psycho Misfits versus Ralph Fiennes, so to speak. Overall, I enjoyed The Bone Temple about as much as the previous film. Despite its directorial change, the movie does feel very much like a direct continuation of the story from its predecessor, which brilliantly established an introduction to this rebooted series from veteran director Danny Boyle. And after having watched The Bone Temple, I will be watching the sequel, and I think I'm actually looking forward to it. Anyhow, the subsequent third movie in this rebooted series is, I think, what was originally planned to be the final movie in this rebooted trilogy. So if you've come this far along to see the second movie, I strongly suggest you continue on to watch the series conclusion. Anyhow, I said in my previous review of the Bone Temple's predecessor, 28 years later, the series can only go up from here. And after watching the Bone Temple, I think the answer to that question is mostly yes. I enjoyed the Bone Temple story more this time around, mostly because of Ralph Fiennes' brilliant performance, and the villains of this film have a more established presence rather than just being a group of generic zombies. Anyhow, what did you think of 28 years later, The Bone Temple? Have you seen it? Do you want to see it? Either way, let me know in the comments below, and like this video if you want to hear more. See ya.